remember the day Belle came home from her first trip like it happened this morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table, going over my third round of bills. My rent was due, my textbooks were outrageously priced, and my part-time lab job barely paid enough to cover groceries. I'd just turned 23, but I felt like I'd aged 100 years. Meanwhile, Belle, my younger sister, walked in like she owned the place. She had new luggage, an expensive camera slung over her shoulder, and a glowing tan that made me look colorless by comparison. Our parents rushed to greet her. They acted like she'd returned from saving orphans in a war zone rather than spending 3 months lounging on private beaches. "Belle, honey, tell us everything," Mom said, eyes shining. Dad nodded eagerly, clapping her on the back. I hovered in the background. My throat felt tight. I wanted to tell them about the presentation I gave in my advanced genetics class, or how I'd spent sleepless nights analyzing hybridoma cells. But no one asked. Belle launched into a long story about her flight upgrades, fancy dinners, and stunning photo shoots for her Instagram feed. I could almost feel her happiness radiating like a neon sign, while I shrank into the shadows, hoping someone would notice my existence. Later that evening, I stood by the sink, washing dishes, while Belle scrolled through her phone. She bragged about the surge in her followers, how her posts from Bali and Milan had collectively gained 10,000 likes. "It's all about brand partnerships," she explained loudly, making sure Mom and Dad heard. "Soon, top designers will sponsor me. It's basically a done deal." I kept my gaze on the soapy water, clinging to the one piece of dignity I had left. Dad patted her on the shoulder and said, "We're so proud of you." Then he glanced at me, almost as an afterthought. "Morgan, you should be happy for your sister. She's on the road to success." I wanted to speak up and ask what defines success. Was it really just about social media numbers and glamour? Meanwhile, I was juggling jobs, working my way through school, and pushing boundaries in genetic engineering research. I bit my lip and forced a polite smile. "Of course," I murmured. "Congratulations, Belle." Her face lit up. She tossed back her hair as if to say, "I know I'm the special one." Mom sighed dreamily, envisioning Belle's future filled with exclusive parties and expensive clothes. I dried my hands on a towel, feeling invisible in my own family's house. I went back to my tiny apartment that night, both exhausted and restless. My place was a cramped studio with peeling wallpaper, but it was mine. I'd spent every spare cent making sure I could afford rent and keep the lights on. Around midnight, I opened my laptop to review my lab notes. I had a breakthrough idea regarding hybridoma fusion, an advanced technique used to produce monoclonal antibodies. I was confident it could streamline the process, making it faster and more efficient. The sound of sirens outside echoed through the thin walls. A neighbor argued upstairs. My desk shook when they slammed their door. Despite the noise, I found myself lost in the excitement of my research. Science had always been my escape, the one place where I felt truly alive. My father used to teach genetic engineering at a local college, and I'd inherited his love for science. Yet I was the only one in the family who stayed up late in a shabby apartment, hunched over detailed graphs and chemical sequences. I thought about Belle, probably sinking into a plush bed at home, dreaming of her next luxury destination. She had no idea how expensive life could be when you paid for it yourself. My eyes ached, but I kept reading through lab notes. I refused to let my dream slide, even if no one else believed in it. A few days later, I visited my parents' house for a family reunion. Belle was eager to show off her new travel videos. She connected her phone to giant living room TV, playing footage of her swimming with dolphins in clear blue waters. Mom and Dad sat in front, almost mesmerized by the bright colors and Belle's excited voice narrating every moment. I stood in the back, arms crossed. A sense of dread curled in my stomach. I knew how these gatherings went. Belle would dominate the conversation, highlight her achievements, and my parents would gush over her like she was the most remarkable person who'd ever lived. I would try to slip in something about my research or mention my upcoming paper, only to be met with a casual nod and a swift change of topic. Belle paused the video. "So, I'm thinking of going to Japan next," she announced, tossing her perfect hair. Imagine the brand collaborations I could secure over there, especially with the top fashion labels. Plus, my followers are begging me to go. Dad looked thrilled. Mom applauded the idea like Belle had just solved world hunger. I pursed my lips and wondered why no one ever begged me to do anything. If they knew how close I was to finalizing my research, would they even care? I tried to navigate the conversation, gently steering it away from Belle's next trip. Taking a seat at the edge of the couch, I cleared my throat. "Hey, I have some exciting news," I began, my voice cracking slightly from nerves. Belle shot me an annoyed glance. She hated when I shifted attention away from her. But I pressed on. "My research on hybridoma technology is almost complete. I'm presenting it next month. If all goes well, I'll publish my findings." Mom's eyes flickered with mild interest, but it faded quickly. Dad nodded but didn't say much. Before I could elaborate, Belle let out a loud sigh. "Anyway, after Japan, maybe I'll do a European tour. My followers love it when I hop around countries. They think it's super glamorous." Mom beamed at Belle, already imagining the dazzling photos. I felt my news wither in the silence. Part of me wanted to shout, "Don't you realize how big this is?" But I couldn't bring myself to do it. The truth stung. They didn't care. Their hearts belonged to Belle's shiny dreams, not my quiet achievements. I left that evening with a hollow ache in my chest, convinced more than ever that I was alone in my pursuit of real success. My daily life was a juggling act. By day, I was a lab assistant at the university. By late afternoon, I tutored high school students in biology and chemistry. On weekends, I worked part-time at a local bookstore. Every paycheck went straight to bills, groceries, and occasionally new lab equipment I needed to test my ideas. I was so exhausted that coffee felt like a lifeline. My eyes had dark circles that no amount of concealer could hide. Sometimes, as I rode the bus home after an evening tutoring session, I'd daydream about an easier life. One where my parents funded my dreams, or at least helped me with tuition. But that reality seemed like a fairy tale. Belle, on the other hand, was constantly posting flashy updates. "Sipping cocktails on a rooftop in Barcelona," read one caption. "Living my best life in Dubai," said another. The comment sections overflowed with people calling her goals and praising her style. Our parents were so proud they shared every post with extended family, which only fueled Belle's popularity. Despite my frustration, I pushed on. I loved my research more than anything in the world. If success didn't come wrapped in parental approval, I'd build it on my own terms. One afternoon, Belle sent a mass text to the family, inviting everyone to view her curated travel reel on the big screen at home. She insisted we gather for a celebration. Curiosity tugged at me. Against my better judgment, I decided to go. When I arrived, Belle was dressed to kill, wearing a glittery outfit that sparkled under the living room lights. The entire place had been transformed into a mini viewing party. Snacks, drinks, and a large banner that said, "Belle's World Tour," stretched across the wall. My parents stood proudly, greeting everyone at the door. Once everyone settled, Belle clicked play. The reel opened with dramatic music and a montage of her stepping off a private yacht, sampling exotic cuisines and laughing in front of famous landmarks. If I weren't her sister, I might have been impressed. But all I could see was the glitz overshadowing actual substance. The family clapped and cheered at each new location. Belle paused intermittently to share travel tips, flaunting how she managed to secure free stays at 5-star resorts. I felt an uneasy swirl in my stomach. Somewhere inside me, a small voice whispered, "What about the real world? What about bills, responsibilities, and forging your own path?" Nobody else seemed to care. Halfway through Belle's reel, I stepped outside to catch my breath. My chest felt tight. As the cool air hit my face, I reached for my phone, longing for even the smallest glimmer of validation. That's when I saw the email notification. My heart thundered in my chest as I read it. "Dear Miss Rye, we are pleased to inform you that your paper on hybridoma technology has been accepted for publication. We will begin the review and editing process soon. Congratulations on this groundbreaking achievement." I read it 3 times to be sure. My paper had been accepted. Me, Morgan Rye, the invisible older sister. In the quiet darkness of my parents' driveway, tears sprang to my eyes. This alone would have made my night. But there was more. A second email from Horizon Pharmaceuticals popped up. "Morgan, we are excited about your work and would like to offer you a lead genetic engineering position. Starting salary, $200,000 per year. plus potential royalties if your innovations reach the production phase. My hand shook so violently that I nearly dropped my phone. A wave of relief and vindication washed over me. After years of struggle, I had found my path. This was the validation I had needed, even if my family never truly cared. I walked back inside, trembling with excitement. Belle was still in the midst of her big production, her travel reel paused on a beach in Thailand. My parents were praising her vision. My aunts and uncles asked about her next project. As I stood by the doorway, the 2 emails played on repeat in my head. This was the moment. I could remain silent, let Belle have the night, or I could assert myself for once in my life. I swallowed hard and made my way toward the television. "Belle," I said softly, "could I share something real quick?" Her eyes flashed irritation, but I continued. "It's important." She sighed. "Fine. If it's really that big." I connected my phone to the screen and opened the email. My father's brow furrowed, curiosity sparking in his eyes. Then he read the words out loud. Accepted for publication, lead genetic engineering position, $200,000 salary. The room went silent. All eyes shifted to me. Dad's mouth dropped open. Mom actually gasped. Belle's expression twisted into shock, like she couldn't believe I'd just stolen her spotlight. I braced myself. My heart pounded. This was it. The turning point where my family could finally see me for who I was. Dad got up and walked over to the TV, staring at the email as if analyzing every word. Mom pressed a hand to her chest, looking between me and the screen. "Morgan, I had no idea," she stammered. I took a slow breath. "I've been working on this research for months, funding it by myself," I said, my voice tense. "And now, a major pharmaceutical company recognizes its potential." At first, there was dead silence. Then Dad cleared his throat. "This is incredible, Morgan. I'm very impressed." Coming from him, those words felt almost shocking. He'd never shown such outright pride in my work. Belle, on the other hand, looked furious. She tapped her foot, crossing her arms. "Great," she said with false cheer. "So you're moving on to bigger things, huh?" There was a coldness in her smile, as if she couldn't wait to undermine me. Mom tried to lighten the mood. "This calls for a celebration," she exclaimed, but the room still felt divided, like Belle's huge shadow was clashing with the flicker of my new success. In that moment, I realized that, no matter how groundbreaking my discovery might be, Belle would always fight to remain the center of attention. Over the following days, my phone buzzed nonstop. Extended family members called to say congratulations, some claiming they'd always known I was destined for greatness. The cynic in me rolled my eyes at their sudden admiration. My father, ironically, emailed me articles about genetic engineering breakthroughs, trying to show interest in my field. Belle's reaction, however, was anything but supportive. She posted vague references on social media about jealous siblings and fake supporters. Her followers jumped into her comment section, offering sympathy and accusing me of overshadowing her. I watched from afar, not wanting to stoop to an online feud. Meanwhile, Horizon Pharmaceuticals moved quickly. They wanted me to start as soon as I graduated. The position came with a generous signing bonus, lab access, and the chance to further my research. I felt like my life was flipping overnight. Suddenly, I had a real career, financial security, and people respected me for what I could do. I still had a few months left to finish my degree, but their legal team also informed me of something else: the guest house lab. Apparently, Dad had set it aside for me ages ago, transferring ownership in my name. At the time, he thought it was just a hobby lab I liked to tinker in. I realized with a jolt that Belle had wanted that space to be her content studio. Now it belonged to me legally. When Belle learned about the guest house lab, her fury knew no bounds. She showed up at my apartment without warning one Saturday afternoon, pounding on my door until I let her in. She marched inside, hair disheveled, eyes blazing with anger. "You stole my future studio," she snapped, flinging her phone onto my couch. "You knew I wanted that space. I was planning a state-of-the-art filming setup there. How could you snatch it away?" I took a deep breath, trying not to match her hostility. "Dad signed it over to me a while ago," I explained calmly. "I didn't even know he did that. But I've been using that lab for actual research, Belle. It's not just a hobby, it's the core of my work." She scoffed and rolled her eyes. "Oh, how convenient," she sneered. "You think because you have some fancy job offer, You can just push me aside? Our parents promised me that space. They said I could follow my influencer dreams wherever I wanted. My blood started to boil. Belle, they promised you, but they never asked me. I was the one who built that lab from scratch. Now the property is legally in my name. If you want a studio, use your own money. Her cheeks flushed bright red. For once, Belle seemed at a loss. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. After Belle's outburst, she declared war. Social media war, to be exact. She painted me as a jealous, money-hungry sister who'd do anything to bring her down. She carefully omitted the fact that our parents had funded all her travels, making it look like she'd been an independent go-getter from day one. Her posts went viral, at least among our extended family and her group of followers. They sent me hateful messages, calling me a dream crusher. It stung more than I wanted to admit, especially since some of these were family members who'd congratulated me just days before. But fate had other plans. A local newspaper heard about my research and approached me for an interview. They ran a feature story called Young Genius Engineer's Breakthrough in Monoclonal Antibody Production. The article explained my background, how I finance my own education, and the significance of my findings. Suddenly the tide began to turn. Friends, acquaintances, even strangers reached out to offer support. People realized Belle's narrative was incomplete at best and deceitful at worst. Belle's carefully crafted self-made image started to crumble. Sponsors began questioning her authenticity. Overnight, she lost partnerships. In the new age of social media, authenticity was gold, and she was losing hers fast. Our parents were caught in the middle of the fallout. Mom called me, voice trembling. "Morgan, your sister is devastated. Everyone's turning against her. She's not used to this kind of criticism." I sighed heavily, placing a hand over my forehead. "Mom, Belle brought this on herself. She lied about being self-made when she was living off your bank account. She attacked me publicly for something that wasn't my fault. I can't fix that." She sounded desperate. "I know, but she's still your sister. Do you have any idea how painful it is for a mother to see her daughter suffer like this?" I paused. I did feel some sympathy. As much as Belle had hurt me, she was my sister. But I couldn't ignore the fact that my parents had enabled her behavior for so long. "She'll have to learn," I replied quietly. "People want sincerity. She has to be honest about who she is. Maybe it's time she grows up." I heard Dad's voice in the background, urging Mom to get me to come over. But I was too drained. I had final exams and a future that demanded my full attention. I needed space, and more importantly, I needed to prioritize myself for once. The final exam period flew by in a whirlwind of study sessions and lab hours. I successfully completed my degree in genetic engineering with top honors. I moved my research equipment from the university to the guest house lab, feeling both excitement and a tremor of nervousness at this new chapter. Horizon Pharmaceuticals welcomed me warmly, sending me documents to sign. Meanwhile, Belle's influencer career spiraled. Rumors circulated that her biggest sponsor pulled out after learning she misrepresented her solo travel. She posted teary-eyed apologies online, claiming she never meant to deceive anyone. But the internet can be unforgiving. Her follower count took a nosedive. A part of me pitied Belle. Losing status so publicly had to sting. But I also remembered how she'd mocked my efforts and overshadowed my achievements. The family tension reached a boiling point when Dad finally acknowledged his role in enabling Belle. He admitted he'd discouraged me from science when I was younger because it was too specialized. Now, seeing my success, he realized he'd made a grave mistake by funneling so much support into Belle's flights of fancy. Despite all this, I kept focused on my next big step, setting up my work at Horizon's facility. For the first time in my life, I felt legitimate, respected, and on a clear path. One weekend, Dad asked me to join them for dinner at a local restaurant. I hesitated before agreeing, not sure how awkward it might be. When I arrived, I saw Belle fiddling with her phone. Mom looked strained, and Dad had his jaw set if bracing for a tough conversation. "We wanted to talk as a family," Mom began, eyes flicking between me and Belle, "about everything that's happened." Belle crossed her arms, staring at me with damp eyes. She looked smaller, stripped of her usual glamorous confidence. "I lost so much," she admitted in a quiet tone. "Sponsors, credibility, even some friends. They think I'm a fraud." Dad spoke softly. We feel responsible. We raised you with different expectations. We gave Belle all the financial support, hoping she'd find her path. We assumed you, Morgan, would be fine on your own because you were always so independent. My heart clenched at those words. I was grateful to finally hear them acknowledge it, but it didn't erase the years of neglect. Well, I answered slowly, that left me struggling. I'm proud of what I accomplished, but I can't pretend it was easy. I needed you. Tears welled in Mom's eyes. Belle's lips trembled. A hush settled over the table, each of us grappling with our own regrets. After dinner, we walked out to the parking lot together. Belle fell into step beside me. Her shoulders slumped in a way I'd never seen before. Gone was the bright swagger she usually wore. For a moment, it reminded me of when we were kids, just sisters running around in the backyard without a care in the world. I'm sorry, she said softly. I know I've been awful to you, Morgan. I was caught up in the idea of being an influencer, traveling and feeling special. I guess I needed the attention. Her confession caught me off guard. I stared at her, seeing real vulnerability. I resented you, I admitted. You got everything handed to you, while I struggled to make rent. I couldn't stand how Mom and Dad ignored my work. Belle nodded, wiping away a tear. I understand now. I relied on them too much, and it made me lazy. Seeing how passionate you are about your research, it made me realize I don't actually have many skills. I felt a soft twinge of pity. No matter how angry I'd been, it was never about wanting Belle to fail. I just needed my own victories to be recognized. For the first time, we stood there as equals, united in our brokenness. With Belle's social media career in shambles, she decided to try something completely new. She shocked everyone by enrolling in a local community college to study biology. I want to understand the science you're so passionate about, she told me. No more fluff. I need something real. Our parents finally did something right. They offered to pay her tuition, but with a catch. No more lavish travel or needless spending. Belle had to cut back on luxury and learn the value of $1. She agreed, somewhat reluctantly, but it was clear she was motivated by a genuine desire to change. While Belle adjusted to her new life of early classes and lab sessions, I settled into my role at Horizon Pharmaceuticals. My days were long, filled with experiments, meetings, and progress reports on my new method for producing monoclonal antibodies. My colleagues were brilliant, and I soaked up knowledge like a sponge. On the weekends, I'd sometimes meet Belle for coffee. We'd compare notes, mine on advanced cell culture, hers on basic biology concepts. It felt surreal, these calm conversations that replaced our past sniping and rivalry. Maybe we were both learning how to build a healthier relationship. One afternoon, I decided to visit our parents after work. My father greeted me with a smile that I recognized as both proud and apologetic. Morgan, he said, there's something we want to show you. He led me to the guest house lab. The space was still legally mine, but I hadn't fully moved in since I was using the facilities at Horizon. Inside, I found new equipment, donated by a few companies that Dad had reached out to. I've been calling old colleagues, he explained. They were intrigued by your research, so they offered these prototypes. Thought you might find them useful. Emotion choked me up. I glanced around at the high-end centrifuge and brand-new culture incubators. It wasn't just about the equipment, it was about Dad finally investing in my future. I'm grateful, I managed to say. He nodded, letting me take it all in. Mom appeared at the door with a tray of lemonade, smiling tentatively. I want you to know we're trying, she said. We're sorry for how we acted. We see you now. I stood there in the lab, tears welling up again, feeling my parents' genuine support for the first time. It didn't erase the past, but it opened a door to something better. Belle's transformation wasn't smooth sailing. She complained about tough coursework, early lab times, and how she missed the freedom of traveling. But she also admitted she felt a growing sense of purpose. She called me late one night, breathless with excitement after acing a quiz on cell structures. It's all so fascinating, she gushed. I never thought I'd enjoy learning this much. I chuckled, impressed by her newfound enthusiasm. Welcome to the world of curiosity, Belle. It's addictive, isn't it? She laughed. Totally. I even started following some science accounts on Instagram. Real ones this time. Not just people showing off fancy equipment. In my own life, everything was accelerating. I traveled to conferences to present my research findings. The more I shared, the more interest I garnered from international labs. People were intrigued by the potential of faster, more efficient antibody production. My phone was constantly buzzing with invitations to collaborate. Horizon Pharmaceuticals even hinted at sending me abroad for special projects. Sometimes, I thought about how different my life had become in such a short span. I no longer had to fear an empty fridge or an impending eviction. My future, once a shaky question mark, now felt like a grand opportunity waiting to be explored. A year after the dust settled, an unexpected invitation arrived. The International Genetics Conference in Paris wanted me to present my published paper. The email explained they had read about my breakthrough in multiple journals and believed I could inspire others in the field. To say I was excited would be an understatement. I couldn't help but remember Belle's old posts from Paris. She had once danced along the Seine, posing for her camera, projecting an image of effortless glamour. Now I'd be going there for something tangible, sharing knowledge with some of the greatest minds in genetics. The contrast struck me deeply. When I told my parents, Mom insisted I stop by before flying out. She packed me a care basket with homemade cookies, telling me to share them with fellow researchers. Dad patted my shoulder, eyes shining. "I'm proud of you. Give them all you've got," he said. Belle texted me a video of her flipping through biology textbooks. "I'm rooting for you, sis. I promise I'll make you proud here too." She had a genuine smile. Even though our relationship was still mending, this show of support felt sincere. I boarded the plane with my heart brimming with gratitude. My life, once overshadowed by Belle's travels, had found its own place in the sun. The conference hall in Paris was massive, filled with brilliant researchers and curious students. My presentation was scheduled for the afternoon. Nervous energy fluttered in my stomach, but I reminded myself, I'd earned my place here. I was no longer the overlooked older sister, fighting to be heard. When it was my turn, I stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, and I could barely see the audience, but I felt their focus. I clicked through slides, explaining my hybridoma fusion technique and its potential to revolutionize antibody production. At first I stumbled over a few words, but soon I found my rhythm. The topic was my passion, my life's work, and the words flowed from that deep well of conviction. After I finished, the crowd erupted in applause. Colleagues lined up to ask questions, each one more insightful than the last. I engaged eagerly, exchanging ideas, forging connections. Professors offered collaborations. Students asked for mentorship. By the time I stepped away from the podium, my cheeks hurt from smiling. Alone for a moment, I thought of Belle. Her old Paris pictures versus my new reality. I wondered if she ever stood in front of a crowd, feeling this sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with likes or follows. It was a feeling money couldn't buy. Later that evening, I found myself walking along the Seine. Instead of a selfie stick or an Instagram crew, I carried a folder of conference materials and a mind buzzing with future possibilities. The Parisian lights glowed against the water, and a warm breeze tousled my hair. My phone pinged. It was Belle. She sent me a picture of a test paper with a big red A marked on it. "I did it," read her text, followed by a string of excited emojis. It made me laugh softly. She was going through a transformation in her own way, discovering that the thrill of learning could be just as fulfilling as a first-class plane ticket. I typed back, "Proud of you, Belle, keep it up." She responded almost immediately, telling me she'd made a new friend in her biology class who also looked up to me. "She wants to do research too, can you believe it?" Belle wrote, "She's obsessed with your paper." A wave of warmth hit me. Even continents apart, we were finally supporting each other. I strolled along the river, hugging my folder, feeling more at peace than ever. The city lights flickered, and for the first time, I didn't envy Belle's wanderlust. I had my own version of magic now. I flew back home with renewed energy and a sense of closure. My parents greeted me at the airport, arms full of flowers and congratulations. They wanted to hear everything about the conference. For hours, we sat in our living room, sipping tea, while I recounted the panels, the questions, and the opportunities that now lay before me. Belle joined us with a textbook under her arm. She gave me a hesitant smile. "I'm really trying, Morgan," she said. "Studying is hard, but it feels good to know I'm learning something real." I nodded. That's how progress happens. Slow and steady. You'll get used to the heavy workload if you keep at it. Our parents, once so fixated on Belle's influencer dream, now talked excitedly about her potential in science. They even encouraged us to collaborate someday, though we both knew that was a long way off. Still, it was a nice thought. After dinner, Belle and I went for a walk around the neighborhood. She admitted that she regretted how much time and money she'd wasted on superficial pursuits. "I feel like I'm finally finding myself," she said. I believed her. The old Belle would never have admitted to any mistakes. This Belle was trying, and that was enough for me. A few months later, I watched from my new apartment's balcony as the sun set. Life had shifted dramatically since I was that struggling student. I now had job security, financial stability, and respect in my field. My research with Horizon was flourishing, and I was already planning my next conference appearance. Belle, once lost in a haze of filters and sponsored trips, was slowly carving out a new identity. She spent her days attending classes, her nights studying, and her weekends volunteering at a local science outreach program. She wasn't giving up on social media entirely, but she was using it differently, highlighting her genuine journey as a beginner in biology. Our parents, humbled by the lessons of favoritism, treated us both with equal admiration. They sold their vacation home to pay for Belle's college expenses, refusing to hand her luxuries on a silver platter anymore. She had to earn her own experiences now, just like I had. Sometimes I still felt a pang of sadness about the lost years, the loneliness of striving without my family's support. But each day, I healed a little more. My story wasn't just about genetic breakthroughs, it was about personal growth, about realizing my worth, and finally stepping out of my sister's shadow. I closed my eyes, inhaling the evening breeze. Success wasn't about being handed opportunities, it was about earning them. In the end, the quiet dedication always spoke louder than any flashy display.